I'm Steve Jones. I'm the editor of SQL Server Central, and I'll be hosting this webinar on daily DBA tasks. Today we have Grant Fritchey that's going to talk to us about some of the daily things you want to make sure you're handling on your SQL Server instances. Both Grant and myself are SQL Server MVPs, and we are essentially evangelists for Redgate software. We work for Redgate, and they sponsor these various events. They sponsor us traveling to SQL Saturdays and various conferences around the world. And hopefully we'll get the chance to meet some of you in person, and you'll come to some of our events like SQL in the City, which is taking place in October in the U.S. of this year, and then we'll have more dates in 2014 as well. A few housekeeping items. There is a questions panel in your control panel, a little questions applet that you can ask questions in there. I will try to answer those or have Grant answer those during the webinar. If we don't have an answer for you, we will get one, and we will post it along with this entire webinar at SQL Server Central. If you use the training item on the menu, we have all the webinar recordings listed there, so if you have to drop out or if you've come in late, you can go back and watch the recording, and you can also see the Q&A as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Grant here in a moment. Grant is, as I mentioned, a SQL Server MVP. He's been working with SQL Server for a long time. He is G. Fritchey on Twitter. thescarydba.com is his blog, and he's got a tremendous amount of knowledge on SQL Server. So let me send it over to Grant.
All right, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. My screen should be up, I hope. You can see it?
Yes, I see it. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Daily DBA Tasks is what we're talking about. Same intro. Okay, so what we're going to go over. Before we even get into all these bullets and goofy slideshows and stuff, let me just say that the DBA task is both difficult and changing. It shifts constantly. The kind of work that I did, 15 years ago as a DBA is radically different from the work I've been doing as a DBA. But the fundamentals are still the same. Your goal, your job, your purpose in life is to protect the data that the business needs to run. And that's pretty much it. So let's just talk about what a daily life looks like for a DBA. Now, mine, I'm basing this off of my own work, off my own experience, and and off the stuff that I've done. And so one of the first things you have to do every morning is going to go through your emails. After getting through your emails, you're going to be talking to different teams possibly about setting up a new database server. You may have new applications coming in. You may have to deal with old databases, the existing apps, the stuff that's all out there and has to get maintained and run. You're obviously going to be dealing with new deployments, right? As you either make changes to the old stuff or you introduce a new application, all of those things have to get out into production. You're going to have service packs. You absolutely need to keep up with your service packs because, if nothing else, Microsoft fixes security issues and or crashes that could occur depending on the situation that you're in. So you absolutely want to make sure you're keeping up on that. And then the fun part of the day is the fact that you're in meetings. Lots and lots and lots of meetings. It's amazing sometimes that I'm able to get work done as a DBA because I need to go to so many different meetings. We'll talk about that more. And then I'm just going to give you a simple set of rules to live by as a DBA. All right, so that's our agenda. Let's go ahead and get started. We got to talk about the morning emails. Oh, wait, sorry. We're not going to get to the morning emails. The reason being, DBA's jobs start way before the morning sometimes. Other people are waiting until they get to work, and you guys are actually, at work at 3 a.m. because the DBA frequently, not always, but frequently, is on call. And that means if a server goes down at 3 a.m., you're the person who receives a phone call. If there's a problem with the application at 3 a.m., you're the person who gets that phone call. Back in the day, we used to carry pagers, but now everything goes through your phone, right? It's all coming through phones, It's either instant messages or actually direct calls from the server onto your phone, and you've got to have that number set up with a particular ringtone, and so that you know at 3 a.m. to wake up and deal with it. and it's pretty horrible. Now, Redgate does offer a tool that's going to help you there. It's going to help you in two ways. We have SQL Monitor. SQL Monitor's got a whole set of alerting built into it. That alerting is what will wake you up at 3 a.m. when certain circumstances occur. But better still, it's got monitoring on it so you can set up stuff to proactively prevent that 3 a.m. call. Make sure you know when you're running low on disk space, not merely when you run out of disk space, right? So one of the very first things you've got to do is get on top of your servers to make sure that you minimize those 3 a.m. phone calls, because you're going to get them no matter what. They're just, the universe is against you. It wants to fail. So you're going to have to deal with that. Let's go. We're going to talk about the morning emails. Now, most of the stuff that comes in to me in the morning, I will see failed non-critical jobs. If it's a critical job, if it's something that absolutely dependent upon the business, must have, you should have gotten that 3 a.m. alert. You should know ahead of time that failure occurred, and you should have fixed it then. Because if it's business critical, you've got to fix it immediately. But, again, those morning emails, you're going to see failed non-critical jobs. Oh, statistics maintenance didn't run last night. It's not the end of the world, but it's something you'll have to deal with. Index defrags didn't run last night. Again, might be affecting people somewhat, but it's not, it's not an outage. It's not preventing access. So these non-critical jobs are definitely going to come in through the email system, and you're going to have to deal with those. I don't know what everyone else's systems are like. Every system I've ever dealt with has got one thing in common. Every single one of them grew constantly. Without fail, they were getting bigger. Now, were they getting radically bigger? Were they getting bigger over time? It doesn't matter. Every single one of them, we start collecting data. We weren't removing data. We were always adding more. No matter what, we were always adding more. Even when we started purging systems, the purge was simply to move stuff out of the way because we had more things we needed to add. And it wasn't that we reduced data size. We constantly increased it. And as such, we had to worry about disk space. Now, if you're working in a small company and you're the guy responsible for the server, the operating system, the disks, and SQL Server, this is not a big deal for you. You should be able to set up monitoring so you know what's coming, so you've got an idea of how the space is being managed, and then you deal with making sure that you've got the right disks in place. If you're working for a medium to a large organization, you probably are dealing with a SAN or some other type of network storage, and you're dealing with other people who are also responsible for this information, and you're going to have to work with them to ensure that you've got the disk space you need in order to get stuff done. Another email that you get on a regular basis, assuming you set this up, and you really should, is you're going to get performance alerts. You're going to get, and this is your moment to be proactive. You'll know that queries are slowing down, that you are using too much CPU, that you're seeing disk binding, that you're using too much I/O. And no users have complained yet, but you've got the ability to see this stuff coming and do something about it proactively, right? This is your chance for performance tuning before it causes failures, before it causes outages, before the CIO calls up and says, my favorite report is running way too long. What are you going to do about it, right? You want to make sure that you're on top of that stuff. You're also going to get work requests. Now, when I was working for my previous employer, I was involved with a large number of teams. I worked directly with the DBA team. I worked directly with the development team, but I was also a go-to person for various business parts of the organization and other IT staff. I was getting stuff like security. Who can log in? Who can't log in? What level of access can we have? And constant requests coming in. I would get those phone calls. Please, please, this query is running too slow. We need to make it run faster. So that stuff all came in. I would request for deployment. If you're working with lots of development teams and you have lots of environments, dev, QA, financial testing, load testing, performance testing, staging, pre-prod, production, post-prod, reporting, you've got to move your queries and structures between all these different environments, and constantly, you're going to be dealing with all these requests for those things. And then, frankly, you're going to get questions, right? It's just inevitable. You're going to get the questions, why doesn't this work like this? Why can't we use multi-statement user-defined functions that call multi-statement user-defined functions, which join on multi-statement user-defined functions? And you've got to come up with all the answers. And this is just your morning emails, guys. We haven't even gotten into actually doing work yet. We're just cleaning out all the accumulated stuff since we went home last night and, the 3 a.m. crash. Once again, Redgate can help you with some of this stuff. Performance monitoring and alerting, again, coming out of SQL Monitor is going to be a big plus for you. But also you're going to look at things like compare, which will allow you to look at different servers and see how they, see if changes have occurred. You're going to look at SQL Doc, which is going to allow you to document the databases. So when people ask what's wrong with this or what's going on over here, you're going to be able to give them information. And so all these kinds of tools, we've got the ability to help you out with these things, to walk you through and take care of you when you're doing this stuff. So that's our morning emails. Now let's actually try to get some work done. Let's talk about the new server. So either new production systems coming in or a new dev teams come online, and you get the request, hey, we need a new server. But honestly, my first question is, really? Do we need a new server? Are you sure? Because we've got a lot of servers already. Or do we even need to buy a server? Maybe we could go with a virtual server. We don't necessarily need to buy Iron anymore, right? You can put stuff up onto Amazon Web Services. You can put stuff up onto Azure. You could put stuff up onto, oh crap, what's the other hosting, the other big hosting place? Anyway, or you already have the Iron on site, but you only need a small server, so you virtualize it. You create a virtual server within existing systems. You don't have to have physical boxes, but let's say that you do, or let's say that you at least need to understand what are the exact requirements that we're trying to meet. You need to talk to the dev team or to the production team that's requested this stuff and say, okay, why is it that you need this? Is it an actual need for a new server, or is it something we can satisfy on an existing machine? Do we need a physical box, or can we go with a virtual box? Regardless of virtual or physical, how big a box do we need? How much CPU are you going to be using? Best guess. How much disk I/O are you going to be using? Best guess. All of this kind of stuff you're going to have to gather, put together, and figure out this next to decide on purchasing this stuff. You have to make the decision on, if I'm going to buy a box, where do I buy it from? Do I have a vendor that I buy it from? If I have a vendor that I buy it from, do they have the box I need? Do they have a big enough box? If I'm going with a virtual box, or if I'm going with off-site, Azure type stuff, will they have what I need? We've defined the needs, but now we've got to set this stuff up. But you know what? We're still not done here. We've also got to talk about the fact you need to decide on whether or not there's high availability needed, right? Simply saying, oh, we need a new server, great. What? You have a new database and you want to put it on a server. Cool. But now, what kind of uptime do we need? What kind of failover ability do we need? Are we going to be setting up clustering? Are we going to be setting up mirroring? Would we set up mirroring at all, considering the fact that it's, in theory, deprecated and going to be going away completely off the Microsoft stack? If we're talking new stuff, would we apply this older technology? Well, you've got to discuss it and figure it out and think it through. Again, part of your daily tasks is going to do this stuff. If you have a new server, are you going to have high availability disks as well as a high availability server? Are you going to set up a SAN? If you're setting up a SAN, is this a new SAN? You've never set one up before? Or do you have an existing SAN that you're plugging into? Or are you plugging into it for the first time? You've got to work with the SAN team. You've got to get involved with all these different people and all these different organizations to figure out exactly what you need for this new server. There is no simple tasks of, oh, here, we've got a request, go buy a box. I mean, that can happen, but the bigger the organization, the more people who are involved, the deeper this hole goes, and the more work you're going to get involved with to make sure that you set up everything the way you need to set it up. And then you get the fun part. Most everything we've talked about here for getting this new server set up are IT decisions. We think there will be this many CPU. We think there will be this many users. We think that the behavior of the system looks like this. So we can set up whether or not we need a virtual or physical, where we're going to go to get the box, whether we're setting up clustering and mirroring, saying all that fun stuff are all IT decisions largely. Disaster planning is when you actually have to talk to the business to understand from a business aspect this new thing that we are introducing to the system, what are its needs? What uptime does it have to have? What availability for recovery does it have to have? You know, how do we set up its backups? How do we set up offsite backups? Do we have a secondary offsite system? You know, does our failover have to go through always-on high availability out to an Azure stack as a backup on top of physical boxes that we maintain on site? All of these types of decisions are business calls, not technical calls. The business definition will drive the technical aspects, but it's still a business definition, not a technical one. You can't just walk into your boss and say, hey, I've decided that we need 5 nines for this particular server. That means 99.999% uptime. Look up exactly how many minutes of downtime that represents, and you're going to be spending a lot of money to meet that requirement. This is a business call. You're going to go through it. Now, as far as Redgate tools and this new server type of thing, we don't have a whole lot to offer in this area. This isn't the kind of thing that we do. We're much more of a database type stuff. We have lots of stuff on backups, which will help you with your DR. We have lots of stuff on the ability to deploy these things, which are definitely going to help you with everything down the road. But when you're setting up that server, you're going through the definitions of the server itself, Redgate's not going to be adding a whole lot to your overhead on that one, all right? So we got a new server because we have a new application. A new application, well, here's the first thing that I always like to know. I'm grand, we've got a new app. What are the requirements? By requirements, I mean security. I mean transactions per second. I mean anticipated amount of data. I mean anticipated load type. It's going to be primarily read, primarily write. Are you using an ORM? Are you, generating ad hoc T-SQL, or are you going to be writing stored procedures, or are you going to be using parameterized queries? How exactly are you planning to put this together? What business needs does this meet? All of this type of information I want to know about because I need to understand exactly how to set things up in order to support the business and the developers best. It's not that I'm a roadblock. It's not that I'm trying to slow things down. It's that I'm trying to understand so I make decent, intelligent decisions, informed decisions, so I don't get it wrong and then we have to change things later. One of my first questions is definitely going to be, are we looking at a new database? Or are we just adding to an existing database? If we're looking at a new database, we're probably going to start looking at normalization, right? Brand spanking new database. If it's something you're just getting handed like a third-party product, great, you do the install. But if it's something you're building, you've got to go through design processes. You've got to think it through, figure out what's going on. A fundamental part of the design process is setting up indexing. You only get one clustered index per table. That should be part of your design. It is not premature optimization to figure out what the clustered index is. That is part of the design. That is part of the building of the initial process. It is absolutely fundamental because the clustered index is how the data is stored within SQL Server. Yeah, you can use heaps, but it's not recommended. Almost everybody says for most tables in most databases, you must have a clustered index. Now, notice there are a couple of weasel words there, most and most, but exceptions should be exceptional. So you've got to, as a fundamental part of your design, figure out exactly how you're doing that normalization, figure out exactly how you're doing the indexing, at the very least, the cluster, right? You don't need to create all the non-clustered indexes that are going to support the system, because that would be a premature optimization. You don't know for sure how the queries are going to be run. But you do need to worry about the code on this new system, right? I've mentioned it before, but are we looking at an object relational mapping tool? Do we want to use Hibernate? Do we want to use Entity Framework? Do we want to use one of the other tools out there? I have nothing against them. I think they're great when implemented properly. So we're going to have to take a look at how you guys are writing the code, how the dev teams are putting it together to ensure that they're implementing it the right way. Because you can implement, any tool, right? Any tool can be used wrong. So you always want to make sure that this tool, which is a fine tool, is used correctly. So you're going to have to worry about that code. You're going to have to worry about the T-SQL. You have to worry about, make sure that you've got some standards set. All of this stuff is part of your fundamental thing of getting these things done. You're going to have to worry about the allocation, right? How much CPU? How much space? How much transactions? So is this going to go on that new server that we created, or is this going on an existing server? You're going to have to go through a design review. You want to release stuff into the wild, into production, without understanding what it is. You don't want to have to go through that stuff without understanding exactly what you've done it, how you've done it, and put these things together. And then finally, you're creating, well, not finally, sorry, I got one more. Databases need to be treated like code while they're under development. You need to treat it exactly like code, and that means getting it into change management, getting it into source control, and coming up with a deployment and development methodology that supports the development team, right? Supports the development team while protecting production. You've got to do both. You've got to meet both those requirements. It means setting up testing. Oh, Redgate, how can we help you here? Well, we are all over this. For requirements, we've got stuff like SQL Doc, which can help you document the databases that you have, document the databases as you build them. For new databases, as you're building stuff, we've got SQL Compare, SQL Data Compare, which allow you to compare structures either from scripts to a database or between two databases. For design reviews, change management, SQL Source Control, which will allow you to put your database directly from Management Studio into whatever source control system you like. You're a Git fan? Great. We support it. Plug it in and go. But it's going to allow you to create that change management process where you've got stuff in source control and you've got a known, repeatable deployment process. Testing, T-SQL-T. We've got T-SQL testing abilities that allow you to use T-SQL, language hopefully that you know, to write tests, unit tests, functional tests, even business tests, to validate the data as you're building it and as you're deploying it. So we can support all of this process. This is where we live. I love this part of our tool set, and this is one of the most exciting areas of growth, is in the ability of databases to be developed more like code in order to integrate more tightly with developers and more tightly with application code to deliver a better, more consistent product. This is exciting stuff. So check out all the tools we've got. Oh, and then, of course, our deployment manager, which is the granddaddy of everything to take control of how these things work. All right. So we're still working through your day. One of the things you'll be getting on a regular basis is you've got to work with the old database. Now, I've mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating. Those old databases, it's space management. It's going to come up over and over again. Do we have enough space? This thing is growing. We've got, a new customer has just come online, and the old database that was big enough is no longer. Do we have a new disk? Can we add another disk? Can we expand the existing disk? Do we have to move databases to do it? Oh my gosh, it's all kinds of work. Performance tuning. I am not a fan of premature optimization. I don't like performance tuning prior to releasing products into the wild to see how they're really going to behave once they're in production. But once they're in production, I am all over performance tuning, because that's when things are going to go bad. That's when things are going to go south. You're going to see, on a monthly basis, say monthly reports are coming in, and that locks up all the data entry. And so you've got problems, and now you're going to do tuning. So you've got to make sure that you've got performance monitoring, performance metrics in place to validate this old database, to keep track of what's going on with it. Which is why I brought up the point of monitoring. If you don't know what's happening on your server, you shouldn't be surprised when things go bad. It's that simple. You need to be on top of it. You need to be watching these things. If you're not watching them, you're going to pay. It's just flat out. I don't know any other way to put it. You've got to monitor your servers. That means not simply monitoring queries, but not simply monitoring the OS, but monitoring both and finding ways to coordinate the information that you get from both of those so that you understand at a given point in time why did this thing occur. Also, a major part of your monitoring is the ability to establish a baseline so you know what normal looks like. There's no getting around the fact that if someone calls up and says, hey, the server's running slow, you go, yeah, compared to what? Compared to yesterday, compared to what you want? You know, you've got to have the ability to understand what slow looks like. Also, you're going to have to do maintenance on these old servers. You're going to have to make sure it's correctly. You're going to have to make sure that you've got stuff in place to defrag indexes if they're overly fragmented, to, you know, my gosh, get the backups done, right? Do the data loads, do all the other things. And all of that stuff is work. Now, again, Redgate, we are here to help. We want to support you. We want to make sure that you've got stuff that you need. So we've got performance monitoring for the tuning and space management and the monitoring. We've got the ability to check the databases, take a look at how they're going. We've even got a tool out there that does index defrags for you. So there's a whole bunch of different SQL tools that are going to help out in this area. They're largely the same as the ones you use for new development, believe it or not. In addition to, we've got the backup, the ability to set up mirroring through a wizard. It's all good stuff. So now you've put this new database, or you've made updates to the existing database. You need to get to production. I have a whole presentation I built on deployments for databases because this is a topic of concern for me because I don't think DBAs do a good job. But I'm going to try to boil it down to a nutshell for you guys today and get it really, really short. Here's the deal. I don't care what process you use. Your environment is your problem. And your development teams, each one has probably has a different process that they're using. It doesn't matter. Understand what that process is. Understand how best to get the database involved in it. Get that process designed, get that process laid out, and then get that process documented so that everyone knows how you do your deployments. There's no escaping that. If no one knows how, or if the only way you do deployments is, well, today we did this, tomorrow we'll do that, I don't know, we'll figure it out as we go along, you are going to deserve everything you get. You need to think this stuff through ahead of time to make it repeatable, to make it safe. Because again, I want to go back to where we started. You are supposed to protect the first word on the slide, production. That is so vital to your business. If that information goes away, the business can go away. Deployments are one of the key places where you can mess things up horrifically. So you need to be on top of that, and the first place to be on top of it is document the process. Next, your databases in the source control. The reason being is there's two known states that you can achieve, production and source control. Everything else, if you've got multiple environments, if you have a dev area, a QA area, a staging area, those are all going to be in flux. You're not going to know what's in them for sure. So the two places where you can know what's going on is what's in production today and what's in source control today. And source control, in some ways, is actually a little more controlled than production because more than one person may be getting into production, whereas source control, it lets you know who touched what when. So that's a major piece of the puzzle that DBAs are missing out on regularly and all over the place, is getting their databases under source control. Test deployment. Do deployments to production that you have not already done someplace else to validate that that production deployment will work. Now, that said, you do run into one problem here. Do you test data and code, or do you just test code? My preference, where possible, is test both. But I readily acknowledge if you've got a 5, 10, 20 terabyte production database, you are probably not going to copy that down to a staging environment just to test deployments. I get it. So that's not going to happen. In that case, you're just going to test the code, right? You'll create a copy of the production code, run the deployment against that to validate that the changes didn't cause problems, and then you're going to be crossing your fingers for the data changes. And I get it, right? I mean, there's no getting away from that. When things get too big, you can't do it. But if you're not in that situation, if you're not looking at a 3, 5, or more terabyte system, you should be able to set up a secondary machine and test your deployments to validate that what goes out the door works prior to going to production, that you can protect that production environment. You need to deploy, right? The deployment is getting the deployment done. But a big part of that deployment is making sure that that process that you documented in the first step has protections built in, such as snapshotting prior to running the script, right? Snapshot the database so that you can do a quick rollback if everything goes south instantly. You can get that done, right? Having backups, not just having backups, testing your backups, knowing that if your server were to go offline because of this new deployment, you could recover. The recovery will work. Not simply that you have a backup, but that you've tested your backup. I saw today someone repeat, and I still don't know who said it originally, but you should not have a backup plan. You should have a recovery plan, right? Because backups are nothing. Recovery is everything. You know, if you got a database online, you're good to go. If you don't have a database online, it doesn't matter how many backups you have. So you've got to make sure that you've got all this stuff set up for your deployment, because then you want to make sure that you validate it, right? Database consistency checks in place to make sure that it works. You've got code checks in place to validate the things that went out. And you've got some kind of mechanism to ensure that what you deployed is what got out the door. Rinse and repeat. Something that's going to go on constantly. There's just no escaping it. I've never worked with any organization or any business that wasn't changing, either adding completely new functionality or modifying existing functionality, but it was always, always, always going forward. So there was always deployments going on. So you're going to do this a lot. And the reason that I make such a big deal about this, about making sure that you've got a documented process, making sure that you've got deployments, making sure you've got testing, making sure you've got backups, is because you're going to do this all the time. And if you're doing it manually, in an ad hoc fashion, in an unsafe fashion, you're going to pay for it. Your business could pay for your decisions to go with that unsafe approach. So you've got to make sure that this becomes, you know, a very vital part of your process. Again, this is Redgate's bread and butter. You want to talk about source control? Again, we'll talk about SQL source control, the ability to check stuff in and out, the ability to SQL compare or SQL data compare, to compare not simply between databases and scripts, but also directly to a source control system. Our ability to do deployments through Deployment Manager across multiple environments, our ability to generate deployment scripts that are testable so you can test those scripts. The fact that we've got everything built into command line interfaces so you can put it through PowerShell or put it through, you know, good old DOS and integrate it with things like, before I run this deployment script, let me create a snapshot. You can put it all together through a single set of tools and get your processes automated and repeatable so that they are safe. So you are still protecting that first word on the slide. Production is your business, right? Production is your business. So no matter what you do in support of your development teams, you've got to protect production. I'm going fast, Steve. Are there any questions at this point?
No, you're doing a great job. Everybody's
Cool. All right. Next, let's talk service pack. Absolutely necessary. I don't like reading slides. I like riffing off of the slides and just saying all kinds of things around it, but In this case, absolutely necessary. Service packs are just vital. You must maintain them. I'm not saying that you have to get the latest service pack the day it comes out. In fact, you're crazy if you get the latest service pack the day it comes out. I'll tell you a quick story about my own experience of getting the latest service pack the day it came out. This is quite a while ago. SQL Server 6.5, Service Pack 5. Service Pack 5 came out, and I installed it the day it came out. I think 4 days later, and I had been experiencing all kinds of interesting problems in my production servers after applying the Service Pack. There was a Service Pack 5A. Yeah, the Service Pack that came out at the time, Service Pack 5, was broken. And I introduced it to my servers, and I introduced all kinds of huge errors. We ultimately had to uninstall and reinstall SQL Server after backing up the databases, and doing all kinds of other stuff to make sure that we have, things online and protected. But I burned the system down by applying service packs a little too quickly. Further, the other mistake I made was that I got a service pack, I applied it to dev, and the application did not fail, so I applied it to QA. Well, that didn't fail, so I applied it to production. At no point did I test that service pack. And hey, look what the next bullet point is. Test it. Don't simply apply these things blindly. You might have been offline for a while. Maybe you've missed a couple of service packs, which shame on you, but it's entirely possible. You need to validate that your particular environment, your hardware, your operating system, whatever other applications you may have installed on your servers, all work together with that service pack. So you're going to have to go through that process. You're going to have to make sure that you document the fact that you've done this, right? You write it down. This is the service pack that we're up to on this server, because your different servers in your different environments could be at different service packs at different points during the day, during the week, during the life cycle of that server. You need to know which ones are where. And did I mention you should probably test this stuff a bunch, right? If you're not validating that it's working properly before you release it, you could burn down your production server. Don't do what I did. It was a bad day. I had lots and lots of long meetings about how we can prevent this from ever happening again. It's my least favorite meeting in the world, but it's one that you're going to run into. You're going to do deployment of this stuff. Eventually, you're going to put it out into production, right? You're going to test the deployment. You've got to make sure that it doesn't burn to the ground just because you've applied it. Service packs and testing, again, my wound is very, very old at this point, but I still remember the pain. It's not supposed to, pain is not supposed to be remembered, but I sure do remember this one. And it's a mistake that I made, and one I'm trying to get you guys to avoid. So please, please, please test these things, but make sure that you take care of them. They are absolutely necessary. Okay, so the warehouse team wants to discuss optimizing their data loads. So you got to go and meet with them. The reporting team would like to create a new set of reports, and they're not happy with the way they've been writing T-SQL, so they're wondering if you could support them through a couple of classes to teach them new methods for doing reporting. Now, the applications team, of course, they've got a whole new database coming in that they've built entirely from ORM, and they're wondering if you can put it in production tomorrow. So they want to have a meeting right now. The business, on the other hand, is wondering why it takes so long to get production servers set up, and they would like to have a discussion about that. You're also going to have to talk to the server team. Those god-awful vendors are going to show up at some point and want to talk to you. Yeah, the day in the life of a DBA, one of the hugest things going on all the time for me was meetings. I've probably missed several different teams here. Like I didn't mention the SAN team, the SharePoint team, let's see, who else? There's several other teams, and they all want to talk. Why? Because the DBA sits astride all this stuff. It's all data. There's all information out there, and we're managing the central aspect of the system. So you're going to be coordinating with all these guys, and it's a huge part of your day, or at least of your week. It may not be every day, but it's going to be very regular. You're going to be going through these meetings. My recommendation, be a jerk. By that I mean, you walk into a meeting and there is not an agenda, leave. If there's no one in charge, okay, well, why are we here? I don't know. Somebody scheduled it. Well, who scheduled it? I'm not sure. Well, you want to talk about? Leave. Don't hang around that meeting. As we've gone through everything that we've gone through today, if you haven't figured out that your time is precious, that the 8 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours a day that you spend at your job is not enough, trust me, it's not. If you're sitting around thinking, God, I wish I had a meeting to go to, you might start worrying about your job. But if there's not a good reason to be in a meeting, if there's not a good reason to have you, the DBA, there, be a jerk. Get up and walk out. I know that's unpopular, and I know that makes people angry, and I have had fights with my boss, and occasionally lost them. But generally, I've said, if I don't need to be here, I'm gone. And it's like I love talking to you all. I like everybody in the company, but I don't need to see you right now because it's in the middle of my workday and I've got other things I can do. I've frequently had 2 and 3 meetings scheduled at once, and would go between the 3 of them. Like, okay, I have to go to 2 other meetings. Tell me what you need me here for. Get that one done. Go to the next meeting. It's horrible, but it's the way sometimes things have to run. So just manage this area of your life ruthlessly. There's no other way to do it. All right, let's talk about rules. Purging the DB. So the rules, backups. You must run backups. Further, you must test backups. An untested backup is just a file, and a file is useless. You need a database, and a database is a restored backup. So you must have backups in place. They must be tested. There is no getting around this fact. This should be the first thing you do as a DBA, is ensuring that your database backups are in place and that they are tested. If you're not doing those 2 things, you are wasting time. Documentation. Write everything down. People always talk about, oh, well, if you get hit by a bus. Okay, nobody gets hit by a bus, or very few people get hit by buses. But people quit, people get fired, people go on vacation. And if everything is in your head and you leave through entirely benign, entirely understandable, completely cool stuff like a vacation, but it's all in your head and no one can now get the deployment done, no one knows where the production servers are, no one knows what service path we're on, and there's been some kind of an emergency, such as back in the day when the big SQL virus hit. You've got to have that stuff written down ahead of time. You just do, because again, it's great that you've got all the knowledge, but if you're not sharing that, making sure that everyone understands it, you're messing up. So next is automation. Figure out a way to automate stuff. Don't be doing everything manually. Please God, don't be doing everything manually. Again, you don't have enough time. So you need to be looking at every opportunity you can to automate things. If you do something 2, 3, 4 times, during a week, that should be an indicator to you that next week, instead of doing it 4 times, you're going to spend about twice the amount you would normally spend to get it done, and automate it so that from that point forward, it's pressing a button to make it happen. You need to automate, automate, automate. Automate as ruthlessly as you manage meetings. The more things that you have that you can just completely push buttons for, the better. Test everything. I think I've said test over and over again. Test your deployments. Test your code. Test service packs. Test backups. Test it all. Validate that what you know is what you know. Don't assume that it worked, right? Validate that it worked. Ensure that it worked. Test that it worked. Do the tests. because it's you, right? You're the one who stands between your server being offline, between your business being offline, and them not knowing your name because everything works so incredibly well. Let's talk about them knowing your name. I want you to learn the business. I know, and I've said it myself, and I regret to this day that I said it. I haven't said it in years and years and years now, but a good 10 or so years ago, I said during an interview, that's actually about 12 years ago, I said during an interview, I don't care what your business is, it's just data. I can manage it regardless of the business. And there is an aspect of that that is a true statement, but it is much more of a really horrifically bad statement than a good one. You need to understand how the business works because you need to know that annually they refresh all the policies, and that occurs not on January but in February. And in February, these 3 servers are going to go really slow, and you need to be on top of it. Is there anything you can do to make them run faster? Could you put them on a different server for a given period of time? Could you throw extra servers at it for some reason? Is there stuff you can do to help the business? If you don't know that that's coming, you're just going to be sitting there slack job while the servers go offline because everything's running so slow. Know the business. Understand exactly what's going on so you can make the right kinds of decisions. The best way to do that? Network. Network with people. I get it. A lot of us become DBAs because we are asocial, in-house, hidden. We want to go into a closet in a little hole in the ground, and that's it. Be done, right? But you can't. You can't. You need to network. You need to talk to the SAN team to understand how they've configured your disks, right? Simply saying, if the SAN team just says, oh, it's all fine, and you walk away and there's a problem, it's your fault as much as theirs. You've got to talk to the dev teams. If they're saying, yeah, we're going with ORM and it's great. Okay, cool. How are you using the ORM, right? Don't just assume that everybody's doing things right. And when they come up and say, hey, we wanted to know how you got the server set up, don't shut them down and say, yeah, it's none of your business. Let them know. Explain. And if they have a suggestion, hey, we thought we could introduce this. We thought we could introduce optimize for ad hoc. Oh, really? Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Why do you want to do that? Well, because we've got these new queries coming in that are going to be all ad hoc generated, and we thought that would help our servers. Oh, excellent. That's great to know, and I think that was a good idea. Thanks for telling me. You're right. We'll put those in. Can I help you, set stuff up? My gosh, take people to lunch. Take people to dinner. Get a frothy beverage budget built into the DBA team, and take people out for a beer every once in a while. Network within your organization. Learn. Don't rest on your laurels. The worst thing you can be is that guy with 10 years of experience, which is really just 1 year of experience multiplied 10 times. Don't be that person. You want to learn. Learn new things all the time. Build it into your time somewhere so that you can spend some time learning new things. And once you're learning new things, make darn sure that you are practicing. It's just vital that you know how to do things. Again, on the backups, make sure you know how to do a restore. Because, a restore at 3 in the afternoon, nobody's standing around your cube, everything's cool, you go into a dev machine, you can screw it up 4 times and nobody cares. That's easy. It's when it's 3 a.m. and you're bleary-eyed and you haven't run a restore in weeks and you're trying to figure out what the heck to do. That's hard, but it gets harder. Let's say it's 3 p.m. again. You're standing, you're sitting there, and in your cube, and I do mean in your cube, is the CEO, the CIO, your boss, his boss, a couple of other, dev team members, and they're all standing there watching you type, and every time you go, oops, you can feel the room die behind you. That makes backups and restores really hard. So practice everything that you're doing so that you're avoiding that situation as much as humanly possible. And with that, those are my rules. Nice and simple. Do backups, do documentation, automate, test, learn the business, network, learn everything you can, and then practice what you learn. Get that done, you'll be a fantastic DBA. Any questions at this point?
No, everything looks pretty good. We did have somebody ask if you were actually going to do something to a real instance, do something technical, but other than that, I don't have any questions.
No, not this presentation. This isn't one of those. The other because most of these topics, if I just showed you like a 2 seconds on a backup and 2 seconds on a restore and 2 seconds on a deployment, and you're not going to learn anything, right? So instead, I would rather do a presentation on backups, do a presentation on deployments. You know what I mean? So I can really show how the tools work, show how things go. That makes a big difference. This presentation is really about what's it like to be a DBA, what's important for DBAs, what areas you need to cover, and quite frankly, how can Redgate help, right? So we've got tools for backup and recovery. Mentioning recovery, we've got automated processes built into the SQL backup that will prompt you to run test restores and will automate that test restore for you. So we're making things good. We've got tools for performance monitoring. We've got tools for change management. We've got the ability to do troubleshooting through the performance monitoring tools, through the compare tools, productivity through stuff like SQL prompt, which does the type ahead and formatting, and then storage capacity planning, again, through performance monitoring. So, I mean, it's all back to the same set of tasks we talked about. We're helping out with every bit of them that we possibly can.
Yeah, so we've had a couple people ask, everybody, if there are specific things you'd like to learn about, we are always looking for new webinar topics, and we try to do one of these a month. Please send a note in. We have a kind of an events address. If you send a note to communities, plural, COMMUNITIES, at red-gate.com. That's our address. Let us know the specific things that you'd like us to talk about. And Grant and myself, or we'll find somebody else that would be happy to do a webinar on a specific item, like doing a restore or purging data or whatever it is that you're looking to do.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, there is an offer. You go in with the discount, webinar 27, and get the discount code. And it's a 14-day free trial. I'll leave that up on the screen. And other than that, any other questions?
I don't see any other questions there. As again, this webinar has been recorded. It'll be up on SQLServerCentral.com/training on the training item on the menu next week, and so you can watch it again. I think what Grant's presented here is a great outline for you to watch and then take notes about the specific things you need to learn or specific things you need to work on. All of our other webinars are up there as well. Some of them are on very specific topics. Some are on a little more general topics. But again, if you have specific requests that you'd like to learn about, please send us a note to communities@redgate.com, and we will get it scheduled in the future.